Three women are sitting in a beauty parlor, chatting about their husbands. The first woman sighs and says, "Last night, my husband told me he was going to his office, but when I called, they said he wasn't there." The second woman shakes her head and adds, "Same here. My husband said he was heading to his brother's house, but when I called, he wasn't there either." The third woman smiles confidently and says, "I always know exactly where my husband is." The other two women look at her in disbelief and exclaim, "That's impossible. He must have you completely fooled." The third woman chuckles and replies, "Oh, not at all. I'm a widow." Once there were 4 businessmen. They were sitting on a bench in a hospital waiting room because their wives were having babies. A nurse comes over and says to the first businessman, "Congratulations, your wife had a baby." The man says, "What a coincidence. I'm the president of and one United." The nurse goes away. Then the nurse comes back and says to the second businessman, "Congratulations, your wife had twins." The man says, "What a coincidence. I'm the owner of the Minnesota Twins." The nurse goes away. The nurse comes back and says to the third businessman, "Congratulations, your wife had triplets." The man says, "What a coincidence. I work for Triple Crown." The nurse goes away. The nurse comes back and sees the fourth businessman alone on the bench crying. She asks, "Why are you crying?" The man replies, "I work for 7-Up." A gorgeous young redhead goes into the doctor's office and says that her body hurts wherever she touches it. "Impossible," says the doctor. "Show me." The redhead took her finger, pushed on her left breast and screamed. Then she pushed her elbow and screamed even more. She pushed her knee and screamed. Likewise, she pushed her ankle and screamed. Everywhere she touched made her scream. The doctor said, "You're not really a redhead, are you?" "Well, no," she said. "I'm actually a blonde." "I thought so," the doctor said. "Your finger is broken." An American man is visiting Sydney, Australia, going around seeing all the sights. Suddenly he is struck by a car, injuring him and putting him into a coma for 24 hours. He wakes up in the hospital, dazed and disoriented. He just sees the all-white room. He hears a voice and asks the nurse, "Did I come here to die?" She turns and flatly responds, "Nah, mate, you came here yesterday." A little boy is being very bad on the plane until an old man whispers in his ear. As the crowded airliner prepared for takeoff, the calm was shattered by the wild tantrum of a 5-year-old boy. His frustrated, embarrassed mother tried everything to soothe him, but the boy only screamed louder and kicked the seats around him, much to the dismay of the nearby passengers. Suddenly, from the back of the plane, an elderly man, dressed in the uniform of an Air Force general, slowly walked up the aisle. With a soft, reassuring hand gesture, he stopped the frazzled mother and bent down to whisper something into the boy's ear, motioning toward the decorations on his chest. Almost immediately, the boy stopped crying, gently took his mother's hand, and quietly fastened his seatbelt. The entire plane erupted into spontaneous applause. As the general made his way back to his seat, one of the flight attendants, curious and impressed, approached him. "Excuse me, General," she asked, "but what did you say to that little boy?" The general smiled gently and said, "I showed him my pilot's wings, service stars, and battle ribbons, and I told him they gave me the authority to throw one passenger out of the plane on any flight I choose." Two nicely dressed ladies happened to start up a conversation during an endless wait at the LAX airport. The first lady was an arrogant California woman married to a wealthy man. The second was a well-mannered elderly woman from the South. When the conversation centered on whether they had any children, the California woman started by saying, "When my first child was born, my husband built a beautiful mansion for me." The lady from the South commented, "Well, isn't that precious?" The first woman continued, When my second child was born, my husband bought me a beautiful Mercedes-Benz. Again, the lady from the south commented, "Well, isn't that precious?" The first woman continued boasting, "Then, when my third child was born, my husband bought me this exquisite diamond bracelet." And again, the southern lady commented, "Well, isn't that precious?" The first woman then asked the southern lady, "What did your husband buy for you when you had your first child?" "My husband sent me to charm school," declared the southern lady. "Oh my God, what on earth for?" asked the first woman. The southern lady responded, "Well, for example, instead of saying, 'Who gives a I learned to say, 'Well, isn't that precious?'" A man was pouring colored water every day on the streets of his town. One day, his neighbor called the police because he was pouring suspicious liquids on the streets. When the police came, they asked the man, "What are you pouring on the streets?" The guy said, "I was pouring anti-crocodile liquids." The officer said, "But there are no crocodiles in this town." The guy said, "You are welcome." A police officer attempts to stop a biker for speeding, but the biker gradually increases his speed until he's going over 100 miles per hour. Eventually, the biker realizes he can't escape and pulls over. The cop approaches and says, "It's been a long day, and my shift is almost over. If you can give me a good excuse for your behavior, I'll let you go." The biker thinks for a few seconds and then says, "My wife ran away with a cop about a week ago. I thought you might be that officer trying to return her." A lawyer married a woman who had previously divorced 5 husbands. On their wedding night, she told her new husband, "Please be gentle, I'm still a virgin." "What?" said the puzzled groom. "How can that be if you've been married 5 times?" "Well, husband 1 was a sales representative. He kept telling me how great it was going to be. Husband 2 was an engineer. He understood the basic process, but wanted 3 years to research, implement, and design a new state-of-the-art method. Husband 3 was in marketing. Although he had a nice product, he was never sure how to position it. Husband 4 was a psychologist. All he ever did was talk about it. Husband 5 was a stamp collector. All he ever did was, God, I miss him. But now that I've married you, I'm really excited." "Good," said the lawyer. "But why?" "You're a lawyer," she replies. "This time I know I'm going to get A man was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching his wife as she gazed at herself in the mirror. With her birthday approaching, he asked what she'd like as a gift. "I'd like to be 8 again," she replied, still staring at the mirror. On the morning of her birthday, he woke up early, prepared a big bowl of Cocoa Pops, and then took her to Adventure World theme park. What a day! He put her on every ride in the park. The death slide, the wall of fear, the screaming roller coaster, everything available. 5 hours later, they staggered out of the theme park. Her head was spinning, and her stomach was upside down. Next, he took her to McDonald's, where he ordered her a Happy Meal with extra fries and a chocolate shake. Then it was off to the movie theater for the latest superhero saga, complete with popcorn, soda, and her favorite candy, M&M's. What a fabulous adventure. Finally, she wobbled home with her husband and collapsed into bed, utterly exhausted. He leaned over her with a big smile and lovingly asked, "Well, dear, what was it like being 8 again?" Her eyes slowly opened, and her expression suddenly changed. "I meant my dress size, you idiot!" A man and woman had been married for more than 60 years. They had shared everything. They had talked about everything. They had kept no secrets from each other, except that the little old woman had a shoebox in the top of her closet that she had cautioned her husband never to open or ask her about. For all of these years, he had never thought about the box. But one day, the little old woman got very sick, and the doctor said she would not recover. In trying to sort out their affairs, the little old man took down the shoebox and took it to his wife's bedside. She agreed that it was time that he should know what was in the box. When he opened it, he found 2 crocheted dolls and a stack of money totaling $95,000. He asked her about the contents. "When we were to be married," she said, "my grandmother told me the secret of a happy marriage was to never argue. She told me that if I ever got angry with you, I should just keep quiet and crochet a doll." The little old man was so moved, he had to fight back tears. Only 2 precious dolls were in the box. She had only been angry with him 2 times in all those years of living and loving. He almost burst with happiness. "Honey," he said, "that explains the dolls. But what about all of this money? Where did it come from?" "Oh," she said, "that's the money I made from selling the dolls." An old man calls his son and says, "Listen, your mother and I are getting divorced. 45 years of misery is enough." "Dad, what are you talking about?" the son screams. "We can't stand the sight of each other any longer," he says. "I'm sick of her face, and I'm sick of talking about this. So call your sister and tell her." And he hangs up. Now, the son is worried. He calls his sister. She says, "Like they're getting divorced." She calls their father immediately. "You're not getting divorced. Don't do another thing. The 2 of us are flying home tomorrow to talk about this. Until then, don't call a lawyer. Don't file a paper. Do you hear me?" She hangs up the phone. The old man turns to his wife and says, "Okay, they're both coming for Christmas and paying their own airfares." A mom and her son were visiting Vegas. They were trying to catch a cab when the boy noticed a bunch of ladies dressed up really wild, standing on a street corner. Finally, they got a taxi, and they both hop in. The boy asked his mom, "Mom, what are those ladies waiting for?" The mom replied, "Oh, they're waiting for their husbands to pick them up after work." The taxi driver, overhearing the conversation, interrupted. "Come on, lady. Tell him the truth. They're not waiting for husbands. They're hookers." The boy was quiet for a minute. Then he asked, "Mom, do hookers have kids?" The mom said, "Of course, honey. That's where taxi drivers come from." A police officer is sitting in his cruiser watching for speeding cars. He sees a car puttering along at 10 kilometers per hour and thinks, this car is almost as dangerous as a speeder, and pulls them over. As he walks up to the car, and little of lady driving rolls down the window and asks, "Is there something wrong, officer?" "Well, yes," says the cop. "Why are you driving so slowly?" "I'm going the limit," says the little old lady, very confused. "The sign back there says 10. "You're mistaken, ma'am. That sign was to tell you that this is Route 10. The limit here, 60. "Oh my," says the woman, very embarrassed. "I am so sorry. I will pay closer attention to the signs." At this point, the police officer notices the other passengers in the car. 3 more elderly women, all very pale and wide-eyed, clutching the armrests with white-knucked hands. "Ma'am," he asks, "are your passengers all right?" They look quite shaken. "Oh, they'll be fine, dear," says the elderly woman. "We just turned off of Route 250. One evening, a man was at home watching TV and eating peanuts. He'd toss them in the air and then catch them in his mouth. In the middle of catching one, his wife asked him a question, and as he turned to answer her, a peanut fell in his ear. He tried and tried to dig it out, but succeeded in only pushing it in deeper. He called his wife for assistance, and after hours of trying, they became worried and decided to go to the hospital. As they were ready to go out the door, their daughter came home with her date. After being informed of the problem, their daughter's date said he could get the peanut out. The young man told the father to sit down, then proceeded to shove 2 fingers up the father's nose and told him to blow hard. When the father blew, the peanut flew out of his ear. The mother and daughter jumped and yelled for joy. The young man insisted that it was nothing. Once he was gone, the mother turned to the father and said, "That's so wonderful. Isn't he smart? What do you think he's going to be when he grows up?" The father replied, "From the smell of his fingers, our son-in-law." An elderly couple is having their anniversary dinner together in a small restaurant. The old man leans over and asks his wife, "Do you remember the very first time we made love together over 50 years ago? We were behind this same restaurant, and you were leaning against the fence, and I made love to you from behind for a long time." "Oh, yes, dear," she says. "I remember it, like it was yesterday." "Well, okay, dear," he says. "How about if we take a stroll around there again, and we can do it all over again for old time's sake?" "Ooh, Henry, you devil! That sounds like a really good idea," his wife answers. At the same time, there's a police officer sitting at the next table listening to all this and having a chuckle to himself. He's thinking, "I've got to go and see this. Two oldsters shagging against a fence behind this restaurant. I should just keep an eye on them so they won't get in trouble." So after they leave, he follows them. They walk very slowly, leaning on each other for some support, aided by their walking sticks. Finally, after a while, they get to the back of the restaurant and make their way to the fence. The old woman lifts her dress, takes her underwear down, and the old man drops his pants. She turns around facing the fence, and as she hangs onto the fence, the old man moves in. Suddenly, they erupt into the most furious lovemaking that the watching police officer has ever seen in his life. They are moving and jumping as if they were 18 years old. They keep going for about 40 minutes or more. The old woman is yelling, "Oh, God, Henry!" He's hanging onto her hips for dear life. This is the most athletic love-making imaginable. Finally, they both collapse panting on the floor. The police officer is completely amazed. He's thinking that he has learned something about life that he didn't know until now. He also thinks about his own elderly parents and starts to wonder whether they also still make love like this. After about an hour of lying down on the floor for recovering, the old man and his wife struggle to their feet and start putting their clothes back on. The police officer, still watching, thinks, "That was truly unbelievable. The old man was going like a train. I really need to ask him what his secret is." As the old couple passes, he says to them, "That was really something else. You must have been shagging for about 40 minutes or more, like you are 18 years old. How do you even manage it? You must have had a great life together. Is there some sort of secret I don't know about?" "No, there's no secret," the old man says, "except that 50 years ago that damn fence wasn't electric." There lived an elderly lawyer who was known for his sharp wit and unwavering honesty. He had a loving wife and a bustling household of 12 lively children. Though his days were filled with chaos and laughter, he found himself in a predicament. His rental agreement was ending, and he needed to find a new home for his big family. But there was a problem. Whenever he mentioned having 12 children, landlords would politely decline, fearing the wear and tear such a large brood might bring to their property. The lawyer, true to his profession, refused to lie about his situation. After all, lawyers don't lie. They find creative solutions. One day, inspiration struck. The lawyer asked his wife to take 11 of their children on an outing to the cemetery for a peaceful stroll. Meanwhile, he took the youngest child with him to meet a real estate agent. At one of the viewings, the lawyer was impressed by a charming home with a beautiful garden. The agent, eager to finalize the deal, asked, "How many children do you have, sir?" The lawyer replied truthfully, "I have 12 children." The agent, raising an eyebrow, followed up, "And where are the others?" With a solemn expression and a dramatic pause, the lawyer answered, "They are in the cemetery." with their mother. The agent, moved by what he assumed was a tragic story, didn't press further and quickly handed over the keys. The family soon moved into their new home, where laughter and joy filled the rooms once again. Joe grew up in a small town, then moved away to attend college and law school. He decided to come back to the small town because he could be a big man in this small town. He really wanted to impress everyone. He opened his new law office, but business was very slow at first. One day, he saw a man coming up the sidewalk to his office. He decided to make a big impression on this new client when he arrived. As the man came to the door, Joe picked up the phone. He motioned the man in, all the while saying, "No, absolutely not. You tell those clowns in New York that I won't settle this case for less than $1 million. Yes, the appeals court has agreed to hear that case next week. I'll be handling the primary argument and the other members of my team will provide support. Okay, tell the DA that I'll meet with him next week to discuss the details." This sort of thing went on for almost 5 minutes. All the while, the man sat patiently as Joe rattled instructions. Finally, Joe put down the phone and turned to the man. I'm sorry for the delay," he said, "but as you can see, I'm very busy. What can I do for you?" The man replied, I came to hook up your phone." A man was on his way home from a party when he was pulled over by a police officer. As the officer approached the vehicle, he noticed a large number of knives in the back seat. Looking at the driver, he asked, "Sir, do you have a good reason for needing all those large knives?" Smiling, the driver said, "Why, yes, I juggle them." Realizing the officer was giving him a skeptical look, the driver said, "Officer, with your permission, I'd be more than glad to give you a demonstration." Cautiously, the officer stepped back and said, "All right, but you better be telling the truth." Soon, the man was on the side of the road, tossing the knives high into the air with ease. 2 old men happened to drive by, and both gazed in astonishment. One of the men looked at the other and said, "Sure, I'm glad I gave up drinking. These sobriety tests are getting ridiculous." A young man is walking through a supermarket when he notices an old lady following him around. Thinking nothing of it, he ignores her and continues shopping. As he gets to the checkout line, she moves in front of him. "Pardon me," she says. "I'm sorry if my staring at you has made you feel uncomfortable. It's just that you look just like my son who died recently." "I'm very sorry," replies the young man. "Is there anything I can do for you?" "Yes," she says. "As I'm leaving, can you say, 'Goodbye, Mother'? It would make me feel much better." "Sure," answers the young man. As the old woman is leaving, he calls out, "Goodbye, Mother." When he steps up to the checkout counter, he sees that his total is $625.50. "How can that be?" he asks. "I only purchased a few things." The clerk replies, "Your mother said you would pay for her." Sister Mary Catherine lived in a nunnery, a block away from Jack's liquor store in Dublin. One day, she came into the store and said, "Oh, Jack, give me a pint of the brandy." "Sister Mary Catherine," exclaimed Jack, "I could never do that. I've never sold alcohol to a nun in my life." "Oh, Jack," she responded, "it's for Mother Superior." Then her voice dropped. "She's getting on in years, and it helps her constipation, you know." So, Jack sold her the brandy. Later that night, Jack closed the store and walked home. As he passed the nunnery, who should he see but Sister Mary Catherine? And she was snookered. She was singing and dancing, whirling around and flapping her arms like a bird, right there on the sidewalk. A crowd was gathering, so Jack pushed through and exclaimed, "Sister Mary Catherine!" "For shame!" You told me this was for Mother Superior's constipation." Sister Catherine didn't miss a beat as she replied, "And so it is, me lad, so it is. When she sees me, she's really going to say it." A mafia godfather finds out that his bookkeeper, Guido, has cheated him out of $10 million. His bookkeeper is deaf and dumb. That was the reason he got the job in the first place. It was assumed that Guido would hear nothing, so he would never have to testify in court. When the godfather goes to confront Guido about his missing $10 million, he takes along his lawyer who knows sign language. The godfather tells the lawyer, "Ask him where the money is." The lawyer, using sign language, asks Guido, "Where's the money?" Guido signs back, "I don't know what you're talking about." The lawyer tells the godfather, "He says he doesn't know what you're talking about." The godfather pulls out a pistol, puts it to Guido's head and says, "Ask him again or I'll kill him." The lawyer signs to Guido, "He'll kill you if you don't tell him." Guido trembles and signs, "Okay, you win." The money is in a brown briefcase, buried behind the shed at my cousin Bruno's house. The godfather asks the lawyer, "What did he say?" The lawyer replies, "He says you don't have the guts to pull the trigger." Two friends were driving through Texas when they got pulled over by a state trooper. The trooper walked up to the driver's window and tapped on it with his flashlight. The driver rolled down the window, and the trooper gave him a stern look. The driver asked, "What's going on, officer?" The trooper replied, "In Texas, son, you have your license ready by the time I get to your window." The driver quickly apologized, "Sorry, officer, I'm not from around here." The trooper checked his license, found it all clear, and handed it back. Then he walked around to the passenger side and tapped on that window. The passenger rolled it down, and the trooper looked at him with a knowing smile. The passenger, puzzled, asked, "Is there something wrong?" The trooper said, "Just making sure everything's in order." I know 2 miles down the road, you'd be thinking, I would have had a few words if that was directed at me. A man goes into a cafe and asks for breakfast done my way. He says, "Can I get a full cooked breakfast? But I need it cooked my way. Can I have bacon that's so burnt that it's blackened like pieces of chiseled anthracite? Can I have sausages that are so rubbery that you could bounce them off the ground and they would hit the roof? Can I have all the shell broken up through my scrambled eggs so it tastes like an egg praline? Can I have the tomatoes, mushrooms, and beans so overcooked and watery that they just taste like greasy, congealed slime?" The man behind the counter says, "Don't be ridiculous. You expect me to have the time to do all of that for you?" And the guy says, "You seemed to find the time yesterday." There lived a woman in a peaceful suburban neighborhood who was dealing with an uncommon situation. Her husband was prone to losing his cool under any circumstance, which sometimes led to intense arguments that left them both worn out and anxious. She could not stand to watch as these frequent outbursts harmed their relationship. She was desperate and made the decision to consult a well-known physician in the area, who was also known for his sharp sense of humor. The physician, renowned for his non-traditional remedies, listened to her problems with patience. "Doctor, my husband's temper is driving us apart," the woman said. "I require assistance to handle it. How can I help?" With a cunning smile tugging at the corners of his lips, the doctor reclined in his chair. "My dear," he began, "I have a very special idea for you. When you see him lose it, swallow your ego and your irritation. Avoid getting into a fight and control your emotions. Just hold everything inside till he gets out of the room or settles down." The woman chose to attempt this unconventional advice, even if it perplexed her a little. After a span of 2 weeks, she came back to the physician's office with a renewed sense of calm and renewal. "Doctor," she cried out, "that was a really great idea. I took your advice and my hubby stopped losing it every time. I took a water swish. I continued to sway him, and he immediately became peaceful. How does that come from a drink of water?" The physician couldn't help but laugh at her reply. With a knowing sparkle in his eyes, he leaned over and murmured, "My dear, the water itself does nothing. The secret is to keep your mouth shut." The woman sparkled as she understood the value of the doctor's advice. Their house had changed, not the water, but rather her newfound capacity to maintain composure and avoid conflict. She had learned that, on occasion, our own actions and our capacity to remain composed in the face of difficulty can be the most effective means of solving an issue. The woman continued to use the metaphor of swishing with water to control her emotions from that day on. Her husband started to have less temper tantrums, and their house started to feel more harmonic and tranquil. It was a lesson she had acquired from a doctor with an odd but highly successful remedy: the power of patience, self-control, and the capacity to respond to anger with calm and grace.